Good afternoon and welcome to our first session of our summer series to make your idea happen. My name is Sami and Bertie. I'm broadcasting live this afternoon from Crowdfunder HQ in Newquay. Thanks so much for joining us. We have a couple of extra people joining us in the webinar today. We have my colleague Bertie, who's also from Crowdfunder, and we have Guy Haler, who's joining us from Mock and Coffee as well. Great. So we're going to kick off, first of all, particularly for people who are new to crowdfunding, with a bit of an introduction as to who Crowdfunder are. So we are the UK's largest rewards-based platform. We've been around for a few years now. We've been around the block and we know what we're doing. We get around about 150 projects every day coming to Crowdfunder looking to make their idea happen. And we've just celebrated, just last week, having raised over £40 million with projects across the UK and further afield. So how does it work? Really quickly, just to make sure everyone understands how crowdfunding works. First step, you create your unique project on Crowdfunder, that's on the website, explaining your idea, and you set a target and how long you need to reach it. The next thing that you do is you spread the word. That's to your friends, professional contacts, other people in your community. You basically want to tell everyone that you know about your project. People who like your idea, they can donate or pledge money in return for a reward that they'll receive once your project succeeds. Okay, so it's really, really simple. Any questions at all about how that works? We have got lots more information on our website. So a bit of an example, just to make sure that we're all clear. Now, here we have Lynn and Rebecca from the Street Goat Project. They really like goats. I don't know if you can tell, but there's actually a little goat in the back of their van there on that first picture. So they wanted to raise around about £9,000 in order to open an urban goat farm in Bristol. Really cool idea. So they decided to crowdfund to raise the money that they need, but also they could offer rewards in return for people who contributed towards making that idea happen. Now, 28 days later, in just 4 weeks, they'd raised £9,345, and that was from 167 people in their own community. That meant that they were able to get the project going, they were able to build the things that they needed, buy the goats, very important, but also that they had this fantastic support already before the farm even existed, from those people in the local community who really like what they're doing. And it's not just goats on Crowdfunder, let me be clear. We work with a really broad range of projects, right the way from football clubs who want to raise a couple of £100 for a new kit, to whiskey distilleries in Scotland, and even other businesses, social enterprises, along with charities, schools, and all sorts of different types of people. So I'm going to quickly introduce you to Guy. Guy crowdfunded with us last year for his business Mock and Coffee, and they raised nearly £5,000. Guy, tell us a little bit more about Mock-in.
No problem. Hello, everyone. So as Sami said, I founded Mock and Coffee with two friends a couple of years ago. And when I say a couple of years ago, we spent a long time building a brand, tasting lots of nice coffee, and having a lot of fun with it and getting friends excited. But what we had never done, we had never sold a bean. So we got to a point where we had a brand, we knew people wanted to follow it, but we didn't necessarily know how much people were going to buy. So crowdfunding seemed like a really, really good way to see if we were barking up the right tree. So we pulled together a video, we whipped up some good rewards, and then we promoted it as much as possible to friends. And we were blown away by the success. We had a target of £3,000. And we actually went all the way, well, not quite all the way, but very close to £5,000, and got sort of 80 plus friends and family and lots of randomers coming in to buy our coffee, which set a really good foundation for us to then go forward and develop partnerships and start selling it online.
Fantastic, thanks Guy. That's hopefully a really good introduction to everyone to Mock-in, and we'll be coming back around and speaking to Guy a little bit more later. So that kind of brings us really nicely onto looking at the benefits to crowdfunding. Why do people crowdfund? I think the most obvious answer is the funding. It's in the name. We know about that. We know that you can actually access some funding by crowdfunding. But actually, for a lot of projects, there's a little bit more to it. So first up, validation. And this is something that I mentioned just a moment ago. If you have a project and you're not quite sure if actually anyone else is going to be interested in what you're doing, be that a new product or actually maybe just something you want to get going in your community, crowdfunding is a really great way to test that idea and to find out if there is interest in what you're doing. It's a really great way to do that without actually going through the process of setting the thing up, opening the doors, for example, and then actually no one turns up because you were slightly off the mark. It's a really good way of doing that. What we also find is that people who crowdfund, they tend to see a really big uplift in terms of awareness of what they're doing. So when you're crowdfunding, it's pretty much inevitable. You have to shout the loudest and proudest that you ever have done before when you're doing it. I'm sure Guy will agree with me there. And the side effect of that is that you end up attracting that support because it's something outside of the norm, because there's this very focused activity on what you're doing for that short amount of time, and that actually you pick up a lot of interest along the way. We also find that people who support crowdfunding projects, they tend to be on for the long haul. They tend to become your advocates. Because they were part of the journey of actually making your project happen, they're that much more invested and they really want to see you do well in the future. So they'll tend to continue to be your customers, to continue to be the people that turn up, that volunteer, that contribute to making your idea happen right the way through past your crowdfunder's close date and onwards. Finally, something that we do which is pretty unique on Crowdfunder is we have partnerships across the UK that give you access to extra funding, money which is pledged on your project, just like money from the crowd. You can actually access that extra funding in a really short time compared to things like normal grant applications and processes. Because that pledge is made on your crowdfunder project while it's still live, it's a really great way of accessing that extra funding very, very quickly. So at this point, people sometimes ask me, there are fees, of course, for running a crowdfunding project. There's nothing up front, so you don't have to pay anything to start a project. That's absolutely free. But if you do collect money, if you do close a project successfully, there's a 5% fee plus VAT from Crowdfunder on that. There is also, if you have a look on the right-hand side, some fees from the payment providers. We work with 2 payment providers at the moment. We have PayPal, which most of you will be familiar with, and we have Stripe. You may not have heard of Stripe, but if you've ever bought anything from an online shop, you've probably used Stripe, you just don't know it. And those fees are really clear. You can find those on the website as well. You get to choose when you're setting up your project if you'd like one or the other, or if you'd like both. You can opt for that. Today, we are looking at planning your project. There's actually 3 stages. You'll notice, those of you who've signed up to the Eventbrite, that we have these 3 stages that we're going to be working through on this series. So planning your project today, next week creating your project, and the week after that we're going to be looking at running your project. And in each of these sessions we're going to be honing in on one particular detail and going through that detail in quite some depth. For the rest of the process, we have these downloadable PDF guides. You can find those online on the Crowdfunder website, and you can also find them downloadable directly from the Eventbrite page as well. These guides are comprehensive from start to finish. If you follow them and you work your way through, you will have everything that you need to make your project a success. So absolutely, that's my top tip first of all, is to do that. We're also going to be staying in touch with you throughout your crowdfunding journey. So expect to be hearing from us as you add your project and work your way through. And you can also check out our Crowdfunder community, where you can find tips and advice from members of staff, past projects, and even from some of our partners as well. So I mentioned that today we're looking at planning your project. More specifically, we're really focusing in on finding your crowd. So Guy, I'm going to come over to you now. Can you tell us a bit about MYIH supporters? Who were they and where did they come from?
Yeah, no problem. So we, as I said, did quite a lot of sort of planning before we did the project, and that was initially through sort of research and development to see what sort of coffee people liked. So from that, we had lots of lists of people that we knew were interested in coffee. We had lots of lists of friends of ours that we just knew were going to support us. So we actually started with them. Between the three of us, we made a list of 10 each, and those were 10 people that we kind of knew. We had a sneaky suspicion that maybe our mums might back it, maybe a great aunt might back it, maybe the friend down the road might back it. So we all went out to them really, really personally and said, would you support this? Either we've given you loads of coffee, or go on, your family, you should be doing this kind of thing. And then when we got them all excited, we decided that we wanted them to share it. Everyone's on social media these days. So what we asked them to do was pledge, and then maybe put it on Facebook, maybe Twitter, send an email to their friends, let their neighbours know. So they started actually spreading the word for us. Beyond our sort of list of 10, we've also got sort of access to lots of other people from our own friends on Facebook, and we were able to sort of build a bit of a plan around that. So really it started with a close circle of friends. Once we got those guys supporting it, making the page look really good, then we were happy to go to the next stage, which was go out on Facebook. And then from there, we were sort of looking at influencers and all those sorts of people. So started really close, but let it sort of grow out, which was really cool. And it worked brilliantly.
Thanks, Guy. That's really, really helpful. And hopefully some of you watching will be able to take some of that on board and start thinking about how that might work for your own project. So something that we need to think about up front before we start to think too much in the specifics of who are these 10 people going to be is actually, how do you define your project? So what is it? What are those defining characteristics that makes your project attractive to people? Why would someone want to support it? Now, we've got a couple of examples here that I'm going to take us through so we can see about how you might be able to start thinking about this for your own project. So first of all, of course, we have MYIH. So from Guy's introduction, you'll have heard that, yes, it's coffee. It's about adventure. And a lot of the branding is very much outdoors. It's about taking MYIH to the mountains with you, taking it out when you go, to jump off a cliff, and when you go to swim in the lake. All of these kind of really adventurous outdoors activities is very much what goes hand in hand with the coffee. So you can start to think how that would be really important when they're thinking about who their crowd is going to be. Oh, sorry, go on, Guy.
You can actually taste the adventure with every sip.
You can. I promise. We have it in the office. You can taste the adventure, absolutely. So the second project, which we're just going to look at here, is Samphire Festival. This again is a project that I know very well. I actually went to the festival this year. I missed it last year after they crowdfunded. It was the first time. I was really pleased to be able to go this year. Now, for Samphire Festival, there's the three things that were most important, how they define their project. It's a small festival, so it's not Glastonbury. It's small. It's family friendly, and it's based in the Southwest. And those three things is very much what they based around figuring out who their audience was going to be. Next, we have a children's book. It's called Back Dogs Forever Home. For those of you who like the sound of this, it's absolutely available to buy on Amazon. Again, I have a copy of it myself. I've definitely picked some of my favourites here today. So Back Dogs Forever Home is a really beautiful story about a dog with big flappy ears, hence his name, Bat Dog, who is without a home and is eventually taken in by a dog rescue centre and finds his forever home. So thinking about how they define their project, it's a children's book. That's what it is in its simplest terms. And it's about rescue dogs, so dog lovers. But more specifically, what the book is teaching in children is kindness. I've definitely seen other books where they're teaching bravery or acceptance. Kindness is about being kind to people. And having that in your mind when you're thinking about your crowd is really, really key. So final example, Love the Geopark. This is a project that ran earlier on this year. And I'm actually going to hand over to my colleague Bertie to tell us a little bit more about Love the Geopark. He was actually working with this project when they were crowdfunding. So go on, Bertie, tell us a bit more about Love the Geopark.
Hi everyone. So yes, we were working with Love the Geopark a few months ago. They are a natural reserve in the Northwest Highlands in Scotland. And they were looking to raise £30,000 from the crowd to support their UNESCO World Heritage status. So we worked with them to help identify the different audiences and groups of people that they could approach to make this project happen and raise the funds they needed. And this really was going through the planning stages for them, where they can engage properly with that first guide that Sami mentioned on planning your project, where they think about, okay, we are the Geopark, who are the relevant interest groups who share some common ground with us and therefore might hold some of the groups that we could approach during our campaign. So for example, the obvious one, that it is a Scottish-based project. So you do have a lot of patriotism associated with a beautiful UNESCO area like this, and it is an appeal that could work on a national scale, but also the local scale as well. So that was the challenge, is thinking about, okay, there will be some national interest in this. How do we approach a wide audience of people within this country? And furthermore, this particular area has lots of relevant interest groups. So people who use the area, like hiking groups or researchers, all might play a part in helping you share your project. So it's best to do your research and think about all of these types of groups and how many people belong to each of them and what the best way of reaching out to them will be. Likewise, for that lovely photo you can see of the landscape, it is a beautiful place. So it has very much an environmental quality to it. So there's a whole tranche of people who could be interested in the project who are champions of environmental concerns and want to see this particular area maintained and looked after for the future generations. As mentioned before, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is an incredible accreditation for them, and they are therefore part of this huge worldwide network of different projects who share the same status. So there may be something within that group, people that they can speak to, who could help bring attention to what they are doing to the wider community. The Geopark was a centre for education as well, so there are lots of schools visiting to understand about the history behind the geology and the progression of science and exploration in the area. So this opens up kind of a local element, a national element. Is the Board of Education interested in its preservation? Are local schools or colleges interested in attending? Can we reach out to them? And furthermore, can you design a particular awards to appeal to that kind of group? And lastly, of course, it is a tourist area. So you really want to be appealing to the people who have been there and love it, or the people who are planning to go or might go in the future. So there are a really, really wide range of different relatable groups, and it's your job really to pick apart these groups and think about who you can contact within it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bertie. I think that's really helpful. And as well, when you're thinking about that crowd and you're starting to get together a bit of a picture, which I'm sure the cogs are turning now, and you're starting to think, actually, I might know who these people might be. The next thing, which is really, really useful to do, is to think about where those people might sit on this chart. So what we've done here is broken down, why do people pledge? The big question. We've broken it down into the two main reasons. And of course, there is some overlap. First reason why people pledge. There's some sort of personal gain that they're going to get from this project, whether that's as a really attractive reward on there or they're to gain something from it actually coming off in general. There's some sort of thing which is going to benefit them. The other reason is it's entirely selfless. So they just believe in your idea. They think it's going to do some good in the world. They think it's worthwhile. They think it's worth spending their hard-earned cash on, regardless of whether they get anything back or not. So think about your project and think about whereabouts your different supporters, different members of your crowd might sit on this chart. The sweet spot, of course, is in the middle, when you have really attractive rewards and a really great idea, a story that people can get behind. That's when crowdfunding really works best. So thinking about how you're going to start to map out your crowd, we have in here a template, which is also in that first pack that I mentioned earlier. I think it's round about page 7 or 8 off the top of my head. And it's a bit of a template that you can use to start drawing your own network map. Of thinking about who your crowd is. And I'm going to hand back over to Bertie, who's going to take us through a bit of an example for the Geopark of what a network map might look like.
Yeah, so in my opinion, I think this is the most important exercise that you do. Would you agree, Guy?
I would, definitely. This is what shapes the project.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think before embarking on the project, it's mapping out these different groups that you will approach will give you a really good idea of your audience size and all of the relevant parties that might share an interest in your project. So the best thing to do is get your team together and find the biggest sheet you possibly can and start mapping out these different groups. And it really is a brilliant way of knowing where the money's going to come from once you go live. And then you'll be able to consider what your communications should look like to those individual groups. But ultimately, I think it really, really helps boost your confidence as a project going in, because you're not throwing out a project into the internet and hoping to get funded. You really have a good understanding of who you're trying to target to bring those funds on board. So what I've had a go at is drawing up an example of what Geopark's network map might have looked like. And so as you can see, hopefully, from here you start from the middle and you work your way out. So you want to really get down on the page your core audience. And those, as Guy mentioned, are your friends, your family, your colleagues, any local people in the area who you know. And considering that there's hopefully a team of you, so maybe 2 to 5 people, you can multiply these figures by 5, and that should give you a nice group to start with. And really with this, what we call the inner circle is those people that you have a personal connection to or a direct channel of communication to. So I remember talking to Guy before, and he said one of the most effective things he ever did as a project owner was get his team into a room and spend an afternoon calling through everyone within their personal network to warm up the crowd and let them know this project's happening, this is why it's important, and this is how you can share your support. And within this, you start to think about, okay, so that's who I know. So who do they know? Are there any possible connections there? And ultimately, who I would like to know. And as you move through these different circles of communication, you go into the wider and wider audiences. So it's very important to build up a percentage on your page before it goes out into the wider areas. But to expand it, Geopark certainly looked at, okay, so we've got our friends and family, our core network. Okay, what has Geopark got to offer? So Geopark has a Facebook group. They've got around 2,000 people who are a member of that group. Facebook is an incredible channel to share project information on, so that could be in turn very useful. And like we discussed earlier, there are lots of affiliated interest groups. So in their case, lots of hiking groups or environmental groups that they might be able to tap into through Facebook to say, hey, this is what we're doing, it's important. Would you like to back us? And furthermore, so you have your other social media channels, Twitter, LinkedIn, partners. So Geopark is partnered with UNESCO, as we mentioned, huge following across social media. and Visit Scotland, which is a really nice gateway to that kind of tourist network that we were talking about. And as you start developing your network map further, you'll be able to identify the key influencers, or what we call super backers. And these are people, or key influencers, who are the opinion leaders, who will give you access to a new market of people, new audience. And in their case, we had, through the colleagues, they knew of a local broadcaster who'd highlight them as a key influencer. There was actually a documentary made on the geopark called Walking Through Time. So this was, again, a key influencer, someone that you'd be able to reach out to. They've got an interest, they had an interest in the geopark, and they might have an audience at the ready to run, to approach. And likewise, with your friends and family, to introduce to other people that they might know. And when we come to super backers, think, okay, who are those people who are going to be able to put a larger pledge in? And in their case, it was the John Muir Trust. So we can highlight them as a super backer, because they might be able to provide a bit more of the cash up front. And you really do look at your map and you identify who you've got and how they can help, and it will lead you on to lots of different and interesting connections. And what I advise is, once you've got this, done this mapping process, is to translate everything into an Excel spreadsheet. And you can then get the exact numbers. So going into it, you know roughly what your audience size is. And then beyond that, you'll start looking at, how am I going to approach each of these groups?
Oh no.
Sami's on mute, I think.
I think you might be on mute.
Oh, sorry. So thanks so much, Bertie. That was really, really helpful. Guy, I know this is something that you spent quite a lot of time on.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about your influences?
Yeah, so just following on a little bit from what Bertie was just talking about there on the network map, it was quite an interesting task actually, because on the face of it, we sat down all a little bit sort of glum-faced between us, well, me and the two other founders, thinking we didn't know that many people. When we actually started drawing it up in that sort of spider diagram way, we realised we knew a hell of a lot of people personally, and that we could approach. And then on top of that, we started looking at the partnership sides of who we might have done work with before. And then we came on to sort of influencers. So who are people in our space that could really help? So on the screen now, there's a couple of really influential influencers that were really helpful for us. So Andrew Cotton was a friend of, or still is a friend of Nick's, who's one of the founders. He's one of the most famous big wave surfers in the world, sponsored by Red Bull. Really handy, actually. He's crowdfunded himself, so he knew exactly what we were after when we said, please will you back our project and share it. And one of the best things he did was he pledged on the project and then shared it, which is a really, really strong message in the fact that he's not just sharing it for the sake of sharing it. He also, you know, put his bang for his, well, he pledged on it as well. Then on the other sort of picture, I've got really close links to Wavelength Surf magazine, and as we're going out for the adventurous sort of market, they have access to, I think, 100,000 plus, or maybe even 200,000 on Facebook, lots on Twitter. So I put in a bit of a nudge and said, I don't suppose you guys might fancy sharing this on my behalf. I'll chuck you a bit of coffee as a thank you. And they put it out there, and we got loads and loads of backing through that, which is really, really cool. Again, I'm pretty sure, Sami, have they crowdfunded as well?
They have, yeah. Wavelength crowdfunded with us a couple of years ago.
Okay, so no wonder. Those are good examples, because they knew exactly what to do, and it is really, really important to sort of help them through that process, so that you're sort of guiding them on the message that you might want to put out and the support that you want to do, because then that kicks on and other people see it, and it will help you get that initial momentum.
Awesome. And you did a lot of planning, didn't you, before your campaign launched in sort of the warm-up stage. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we got quite geeky about it. So there were 3 of us running it, and we were talking about loads of awesome stuff that we could do the whole time. And we got to a point where actually we were getting a bit confused of who was doing what and when. So we ended up doing a bit of a day-by-day spreadsheet where we had a little bit of a target and a core message each day. And so before we went live, we were really focusing on, as I mentioned earlier, sort of those 10 friends and family or people close to the project that were going to support it. And we really wanted to make sure that when we clicked that live button, they were poised and ready to drop in their pledge, so that we got off to a flying start straight away. So a couple of days before, we did a bit of warming up, making sure people knew it was coming. We did a bit of warming up on the socials. Then we went live, so we knew exactly what we needed to do. We hopped straight on the phones, ringing up those people really close to the project and sort of saying, is there anything I can do to help? Have you seen it? Any feedback? All that kind of stuff. That worked brilliantly. Picking up the phone was really, really valuable. It's quite hard to ignore a phone call. And we weren't hiding anything because we had really cool rewards. So we were kind of proud of what we were doing. Then once we got those guys going, then we were sort of starting to look how we can get it out there a little bit more. The page was looking really strong. So we had the cool video and stuff, but it was really good that the numbers were ticking over. So we felt really confident sharing it. And then beyond there, what was really useful in having this plan was that we already had decided what the messages were going to be. So we weren't coming back to the drawing board going, what do I say today? It was, we've got a plan, let's stick to it. I think you can probably just about make out, it's a bit of a scrappy plan, but it was meant for behind the scenes. But every time we had done something, we turned it green, so that when anyone in the team, because we were working in different spots, logged in, we could see what we had done. I think by the time we got to yellow, we were sort of chugging along quite nicely, and we maybe hit target quicker than we thought. So then we were quite relaxed and maybe didn't turn it green when we should have. But the idea of sort of knowing exactly what we're doing and when we were going to do it gave us loads of structure, meant that we stuck to the plan, which was really, really helpful throughout the campaign.
Fantastic. That's really great advice, and thanks for letting us share your scrappy plan as well. Wasn't meant for anyone else's eyes. So we mentioned earlier about the extra funding that is available through Crowdfunder. So those of you who are still watching are hopefully wondering how you can access some of that. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Bertie, who's going to tell you all about the extra funding and how you apply for it. Bertie, take it away.
Yes, so we work with lots of different corporations and councils within the UK. In particular, we've got Barnsley, we've got Derby on there, Dorset, Santander. So a real variety of different places all over the UK, which really kind of reflects our broad focus on all of the different areas. So they are very easy to apply for. You can check out what's available via that link on www.crowdfunder.co.uk/funds. And that will give you an idea, through clicking through to them, what's expected of you to get that extra funding. So applying is very easy. What you need to do is, first of all, create your project. And this is your edit your project bar. And in that blue ribbon at the top, if you click on Get Extra Funding in the top right-hand corner, that will take you through to the particular funds that are available. And the system will work these out based on your area or the category that you've put your project into. So as an example, we've got the Santander Changemaker Fund live at the moment. So this is £200,000 made available to social enterprises, charities and community groups throughout the UK, where up to £10,000 is available per project. And you can see by clicking on that extra funding piece what is expected of you in terms of the criteria, and the apply button just beneath that will give you a form which will fill out and require the details of your project, and ask for a bit of an explanation about how you intend to meet each of their criteria. But essentially, it's a really excellent way to get some bigger pledges onto your project and the support of of a local council or a corporation. So certainly worth checking out.
Fantastic, thanks Bertie. So definitely do check out that page. The opportunity to get some extra funding is definitely one worth looking into. So that pretty much brings us towards the end. I'm going to touch on a couple of final points. Before next week's session, there's 3 things that I'd really like you to have a go at doing. The first one is downloading those PDF guides. Download them, print them out, do whatever you want with them, scribble all over them, and have a look through them. Second, start to think about your project's defining characteristics. Start to think about what it is that makes your project attractive to the crowd. And finally, start your network map. It doesn't need to be finished. Just make a start writing it out, like the example that Bertie showed us earlier, just so you can start to see what shape it's going to take. So next week's session is going to be at the same time, same day on Wednesday, and we're going to be looking at how to present your story to make it stand out to the crowd really specifically. And we're also going to be joined by another successful crowdfunding project who's going to be sharing their top tips for success as well. So if you do have any questions or anything that's come up throughout this session, you can get in touch with us a few ways. You can, of course, leave a comment on this YouTube page. You can send us a message via the Eventbrite that hopefully you've signed up to. If you haven't signed up to it, get on there and sign up to get notifications about the other sessions. Or you can tweet us. We're at Crowdfunder UK, or just drop us a line via the usual channels from the website. Thanks so much, Bertie and Guy, for joining us in this session today. It's been a pleasure having you on here.
No problem at all.
Fantastic. I will see all of you next week. Looking forward to it. Thanks so much. Bye.